And in 30 seconds time she said, I want to live like commons people. I want to do whatever commons people do. I want to work with the commons people. I want to work with the commons people like you. Well, what else could I do? I said, I'll see what I can do. Good evening and welcome to Commons People, a podcast about politics, where currently we're hiding in our bunker against the beast from the east. Rob, how are your supplies standing up? What are the tea levels at?
It's pretty bleak out here. We're down to our last 2 tea bags. I've just had to keep reusing the same one over and over again, so it's slowly getting weaker and weaker and weaker. But apart from that, I'm doing okay. How are you doing in this cold weather?
I mean, tea status is nominal. We got a delivery in just before the snow hit, so I think we can probably survive on leaf tea for a month. But then everyone in our house owns a lot of tea. And we have gin and some more liqueurs arrived today, so it's not that bad.
Oh gosh, if you've got gin, that's all you need. I'm there. I haven't even considered my gin stock yet.
You mean you don't have like a special safe with the special gin in case of water-based emergency?
No, we've only got the special gin if the Queen dies, and then we just break that open. Apart from that,
just sorrowfully open.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So this is our second episode. We posted it on Reddit and we got some feedback, so we're going to add some changes to the show, make it a bit snappier, a bit peppier. The first thing we're going to do to try and make everything a bit faster is we're going to have a headline quickfire at the start of the show. This is a new segment. I'm going to fire headlines at Rob, and Rob's going to give me his short opinions on them. How does it sound to you, Rob?
I'll do my best to be concise as possible.
Okay, so let's start with the simple, easy one then.
Yep.
Xi set to tighten grip on power as China seeks to extend presidency.
So this is Premier Xi, leader of China. I believe that leaders of China are only allowed 2 terms in office of roughly 5 years. And essentially there's been a move for him to abolish that term limit, which essentially means he might be leader for life. And as China's one of the strongest countries in the world, that might be seen as a bad thing from other countries if you've just got one man in charge for the foreseeable future.
Almost like Russia.
Precisely. I think that's what everybody's worried about.
Next up, embattled universities face limits on powers. I tried to make that sound as antagonistic as I thought it was written.
No, it's because there's a big... so there's been university strikes last week. I believe it's...
ongoing, right?
Yes, ongoing. And I believe it's about pay and sort of related to performance. But the big thing... when they say about embattled universities face limits on powers, the government is worried that they're spending too much on universities and want to rake some of that power back in, and this is what's causing the tensions between the university workers and the government. A little bit like what happened when the NHS workers went on strike as well. This is tensions between the government trying to rein in spending whilst also trying to keep those who actually do very important jobs in the country happy.
Next on the list, for those of you who've been following the Sky takeover bid, outfoxed, ?
Yeah, I believe this is Rupert Murdoch's bid to sort of buy back a bit of Sky has been thwarted by US company Comcast coming in at the last minute and trying to outbid him for his stake in his own company. If Murdoch loses control of Sky or loses a big proportion of it, it will be quite the upset in the media world, and it might see the media mogul lose some of his power.
Yeah, and I know some people who work for Sky, and it's obviously they're like, what? Like, I don't think they saw this coming, so it was a shock to them as well.
Yeah, it's Rupert Murdoch. He gets what he wants. I mean, that's what you assume anyway.
After that, we had from the European, I believe, the real beast from the east.
I would assume it's Vladimir Putin, and I assume it's because of our weather being referred to as the beast at the east at the moment, that Putin's up to something. But he's always up to something, isn't he, really? Do you know what the European was getting at, that headline?
Not really. I think they were just... There's some concerns about Putin at the moment. And he was... Oh, yeah. This is a headline I haven't looked into because it's not a newspaper I subscribe to. I've literally gone through and scraped the headlines. There's a brilliant link that I'll put in the show notes of a guy who just is keeping hold of the tweets of all of the paper headlines, which is really handy. I imagine I read something today about how
how long is it until the vote? They're about to have their next election, and there was some stuff about vote rigging and stuff like that again. So I imagine it's related to that. And also, he did do he did like a rally recently, and he put up a video where it showed nuclear weapons falling on Florida, and everyone was saying Trump hadn't reacted properly to it. So maybe related to that.
Yeah, the real concern about that speech as well was when he said that Russia has a new type of missile which is indestructible from any type of shield program. So I don't know if you know, the Americans basically have an anti-missile defense system, and if the Russians have developed that type of technology, then it could tip the balance of power, as it were, in Russia's favor quite dramatically. And that's something that America and the West in general would not like to see. It's essentially, if Russia has the power to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile, it's nuclear, and it would get through any defense, then that will cause big problems for the rest of the world.
And I mean, obviously, no one wants a nuclear war, right? I mean, we'd like to think that's the general impression of the world. So
yes.
Okay, next up, major problem for May.
Yeah, this is old Prime Minister John Major blasting back into headlines with a speech on Brexit. There's been quite a few of those this week, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But this was Major basically having a dig at May, saying that he was one that had dealt with lots of splits in his cabinet between people who supported the European Union and those that were against it. Essentially, his message was, we should call the whole thing off. We should call Brexit off. There was a very good line, which if I can find it, of course, the will of the people can't be ignored, but Parliament has a duty to also consider the well-being of the people.
Ooh, that is nice. Yeah.
And it was a real sort of Major who's not looked back on as one of the best prime ministers that Britain had. It's quite odd to see one of these sort of old PMs coming to the forefront and seeing like a statesman, a leader that you might like to see in charge nowadays with a speech like this. I'll put a link in the show notes to the full speech because it's well worth a read from anybody who's interested in the Brexit debate.
So next up, I thought I might I don't think I get any points for guessing what this is about, but I thought I might ask your opinion on the best pun to do with the weather we've been having this week. For our non-British listeners, just so you know, Britain can't really deal with snow. It's partly sarcastic, I think, but there are some people we do have legitimate problems with the trains just giving up when there's a bit of snow. There's a brilliant there's a brilliant video clip from Monkey Dust by the BBC that I'll put in the show notes on that. So these are the headlines I picked out. Then you might have seen a better one. If you've seen a better one, tell me which one you prefer. But I quite liked Great British Flake Off. Then there was Emmageddon, because of course it's Storm Emma. Perfect Storm from the Metro. And this is on the Sun website, not on their actual newspaper. Slush Hour, which was relating to my journey home this evening.
Okay, so straight off the bat, Emmageddon is a good 3 out of 10 pun. It's the obvious choice. Perfect Storm is kind of a 5 out of 10, but it's very safe down the middle pun. Slush Hour and the Great British Flake Off are the real standouts here. Great British Flake Off, of course, referring to our own British Bake Off programme, pretty good, but I think the winner has to go to Slush Hour because it's just a pun that comes out of nowhere. Nobody's expecting an obscure reference to the Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker film, and to have that related to trying to get home on a slushy British country road is quite the achievement. So that's my winner out of these headlines.
Under that, you've noted some stuff about UKIP. Did you have a particular headline in mind? I feel I've missed some UKIP news here.
There's no particular headline, but it's worth just picking up on really quickly, if I may. It's just the fact that UKIP, that was one of a huge political party, came third in the popular vote, at least, in the 2015 general election, is now only 2 and a bit years later on the verge of not existing at all. So Henry Bolton, their latest leader, got removed by a vote of its members, I think the Sunday after we recorded the last episode. That means that they're on their 6th leader in, about 4 or 5 months. They've had a real torrid time where they haven't been able to keep hold of any leader since Nigel Farage stepped down. They've also got money worries at the moment. They lost a lawsuit against 3 Labour MPs, so they have to pay £660,000 of legal fees, which could bankrupt the party entirely. And on top of this, the only local council they controlled, which was in Thanet, which that name is ringing a bell, then that's the constituency where Nigel Farage stood in the 2015 general election and lost. They finally lost control of that council. So we've just seen a party that's gone from having loads of electoral success to absolutely none within the space of 3 years, and it's quite the sight, really, to see that. You don't see it very often.
It's kind of not surprising if you listen back to the How Many Things episode we did on the general election, where we discussed that UKIP had a purpose, and it feels like its purpose is gone because Brexit is happening, and people who had switched from whatever party have probably gone back to their original party they were voting for, and so that's why they've lost this kind of... They're trying to stay in the limelight, right? But no one really wants them there anymore, despite Nigel Farage doing his best to stay on the news despite not being the leader.
Yeah, there's a program called Question Time, which you're meant to have a range of views. I think Nigel Farage has appeared on it over 30 times. He's by far on the highest appearances, with the most appearances on that show. So he does certainly get his say. But yeah, UKIP were a one-issue party. They were the only major political party that supported getting out of the European Union. Now you've got the Conservatives and Labour, both of which are very vocal about their desire to leave the EU. And that's why UKIP died.
Right, and the final headline I've got, which I noted down in my notes, this leads into our next topic, Aren't I Good? And I also wanted to do the voice. So, May vows to secure best trade deal in the world.
I like it.
That's as close as I get to Clarkson.
That's... As long as we can end this episode and on that bombshell, then I'm fine. Then we've got the full top tier bingo card. Yes, this is unsurprisingly about Brexit and Theresa May looking to get the best financial situation that she can after we leave the European Union, and a lot of it centres around what sort of trade deals we can make either with the EU or with countries.
Cool. And so then we're going to move on to the news. And this week, it's going to be 2 different speeches. Both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn have given the big speeches on Brexit. Neither of them are Boris. I suppose we're kind of following on from last week, but I feel like Boris did a speech. We were a bit confused as to why he'd done the speech necessarily, and it was a bit odd. Whereas this is actually the 2 leaders of the parties, the 2 people you would expect to be giving speeches on this. So do we want to give like our brief summary and then talk in more detail?
Yeah, sure. I think to start off with, we've got Jeremy Corbyn's speech, which happened on Wednesday.
So he got the first speech in. May had some time. She had like 2 days to deal with any follow-up to his speech. So she may have been able to change something about her speech, potentially, right? If she was, because she did hers today on Friday.
Yes, certainly. And May had 2 opportunities to sort of like change her speech and change it. So we've said that we've got Corbyn's, and also the EU on Thursday announced what their demands would be out of any deal, what their red lines would be with any deal with the UK.
So I think the general impression I got from Corbyn's speech was that he's finally said something, but it's not really much different than what we thought he was going to say in the first place. So it's finally, people who keep saying Labour's not really made up their mind on Brexit. Well, now they have kind of said what they're doing, but it wasn't really any different than people would have expected. Some people say it was a massive change in policy, but I think actually when people went back and listened through, they realised, like the day later, that really all he'd said was some very basic stuff.
Yeah, I think the Brexit, the shadow minister for Brexit, Keir Starmer, had said before of the Conservatives' Brexit effort that the time for meaningless sound bites was over. But this was in contrast to Corbyn's speech, which was maybe a few sound bites. It was, like you said, nobody had an idea of Jeremy Corbyn's position on Brexit. Labour had hinted at a few things, but Corbyn himself, a Eurosceptic, He was often been quite vocal about how he'd like to change or leave the European Union before he was leader. Now, this was his opportunity to come out and say what his sort of Brexit would be like. And the key thing was to make it nicer and more cuddly than the Conservatives' Brexit, a softer Brexit. Because that's what you expect from Jeremy Corbyn. He's a very nice, cuddly granddad kind of figure, and him being nasty to immigrants wouldn't fit that image. So this speech was all about making sure that he came across with a plan for Brexit, but that it was a nicer.
We're going to have a Brexit, but here's some nice homemade marmalade.
Yes,
kind of
pretty
voice.
much.
Totally,
Yeah. I think some of the major things that came out from Corbyn's speech, he did go into detail a little bit. It's essentially, he's talking about a socialist Brexit. So we would stay in a customs union rather than a single market. Do you know what the difference is between the two at all? Because these phrases are bandied about willy-nilly.
I'll give it a go, and then you can tell me if I've got it wrong. But the single market is what we're currently in, and that is it's essentially maybe this is a forced metaphor, but it's like trading within the EU is the equivalent of me trading to somewhere in the rest of the UK. There's no real rule. I mean, there are internal rules about what things are okay in the UK, but the cost of importing something to another country in the EU is nothing. It's all that there's no rule on anything. As long as it's legal within the EU, you can just go and sell it somewhere else, and that's fine. Whereas with a customs union, you're agreeing to a set of rules that could be very loose and almost equivalent to the single market. But the point is, we're no longer part of the single market. You're accepting. Actually, no, sorry. I'm getting things confused there. So yeah, the single market is like trading with yourself internally in a country, and then being in a customs union is an agreement between us, a country, and the EU on how we conduct trade, and that can obviously change over time. But then so can internal EU rules. So when people talk about rules changing, rules can change in both circumstances. It's not like the EU rules are hard and set. It just might be a bit harder to change them if there's 27 countries.
27, yeah. I think there'll be 27 once we leave.
Oh, that's it. Okay, yeah. So, 27 people voting on something might mean change is slower within the EU, but then the EU has to agree on any trade deal with us as well. So, will that really change? Is that roughly right?
It's roughly right. I'm going to try and pin it down a bit more. So we're actually a member of a single market and a customs union as it stands. As members of the EU, we're in a single market and a customs union. So the single market, like you said, is free trade with, if I'm selling anything to France, it has no taxes on it, has no tariffs on it at all. It goes in there the same as if I was selling it in London, in the UK. However, it's not just the free movement of goods, it's the free movement of services and people. So if you're in a single market, that means that I have the right to work in France and a French person has the right to work in the UK as it stands. So that's what a single market does.
Right, yes. Okay.
And the reason why Brexiteers don't want to be in a single market if they can help it is because of the free movement of people aspect, mainly, because it means that you have no way to control.
At least the more vocal ones, yeah.
Yes.
It's again, to point out, not everyone who voted Brexit was doing it because of immigration, but yes, there's definitely a vocal contingent of the Brexiteers who that's why they chose to do it.
Yeah, and I think polling has showed that concern over immigration was one of the biggest contributing factors to which way you voted in the Brexit referendum as well. So a customs union is about us having similar customs rules about stuff that comes in from countries outside of the EU.
Right. Okay. Yep. I see how I've got confused.
So if you're importing Japanese sake into France, it has a 10% tariff. If you're doing it into the UK, it has a 10% tariff. But this doesn't mean that you have to have the free movement of goods and people, etc. So that's why Corbyn has sort of gone for the customs union agreement, because it gives him a little bit more negotiating power. He can he's asking for a customs union, but sort of making sure that the UK has a slightly better deal than we did last time, to try and make sure that there are more money for public services, such as the NHS, which feeds into another Labour idea. And it also means that we might get to have control over our borders and immigration, and that would be a negotiating point if we were in a customs union and not in a single one.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's clearer now. So
Yeah. That's all right. No problem.
I mean, that's part of the reason I wanted to do this, because I don't know everything. I'm not saying you do either, but you follow this closer than I do, and it's good to stay informed. And I hope we're helping our listeners as well.
Yeah.
So how would we contrast that with Theresa May's speech? So I haven't seen the speech in full. I've kind of had to read up on stuff today around work, because getting in late to work and so on. It seemed like a more measured speech, maybe something we felt like we'd wanted before. Like, this is the kind of speech I feel like we should have had before we left, said we're definitely leaving and did all that, and there was a lot of rhetoric flying around. This is kind of there will have to be compromise, which, I mean, is an obvious thing to say, right? But no one had said it really on the government side. They kept saying we're going to get the best deal we can, which is not quite the same. So I feel like the fact that, I think there's some choice quotes, both sides have to accept hard facts, no one will get everything they want, could not expect to enjoy all of the benefits without all of the obligations of membership. So I think that's kind of agreeing with the EU comments about we're not cherry picking. We can't cherry pick. I mean, they did also, I think there was also a comment about cherry picking as well. But yeah, I think it seemed, from what I've seen of the speech, to be quite sensible. But I feel like it's a year too late almost.
Yes,
does that seem reasonable to you?
It seems very reasonable. It was a very pragmatic speech. Jeremy Corbyn can say his speech with maybe little consequence for what he's trying to put forward. He's not the one who has the responsibility of negotiating Brexit. Jeremy Corbyn's sort of aim is to try and move the Brexit argument in one that favours the Labour Party, but he doesn't actually have to follow through on any of those promises. Theresa May's in charge, and she knows that she'll be the one ultimately held responsible for the deal that we get. So being pragmatic, saying that not everybody's going to get what they want, is a way of making it clear to the British people and to the people within our own cabinet that everybody will need to compromise, and that the country will need to sort of, I can't find the exact quote, but she mentioned that the country would have to pull together and sort of in the national interest to make sure that we got through the transition period as best as possible.
I believe there is a quote in the BBC article, which we'll obviously put in the show notes, of just let's get on with it, which, I mean, fair. Again, I feel like this is a thing some people have been saying for a bit longer than the actual government. But yes, I mean, we have, what, a year left, roughly, until we go into this 2-year period, maybe more than 2 years. We're not exactly sure, right? No one's agreed anything on that at this stage, but we've said we might ask for more than 2 years of transition, depending on how hard we think it's going to be.
Yeah, it will be an odd position, and this won't be the last you've heard of it. Basically, Brexit is going to run and run well past the date that we've set to leave the European Union. I believe that deal will keep changing, or the transition period might be extended well beyond that.
Yeah, I feel like while they're saying there's this 2-year transition period, maybe that be elongated, there are a lot of complex systems that need to be picked apart here. Some things might be in transition for longer. That's the thing. It's reasonable to kind of guess at, but we don't actually know, right? So as we're picking apart all these complex links we have with the EU and working out how they work, you could see something going on for 10 years just because that's the only way to make it work logistically. Maybe it's not a priority.
So yes, I agree that this transition period is going to stretch on for a very long time. One good example is that of Canada, which has taken over 10 years to get its own bespoke trade deal with the EU. For us to want to leave the EU in such a relatively short time frame means that I think we've been fairly naive in believing that we could leave the EU cleanly within the sort of very short deadline that we've given ourselves. And it's likely that that transition period will go on for years and years to come.
And is there anything else you want to say on the speeches in general, or do you think we've pretty much covered it there?
I think one thing that I missed about the Corbyn speech, if I could go back to that, is that Corbyn's not only trying to speak to the Labour supporters who are worried about his position on Brexit, he's also trying to speak to Conservative rebels, those who don't like maybe Theresa May's form of hard Brexit and prefer Jeremy Corbyn's version of soft Brexit. Brexit still needs to be voted on by MPs to say that they're happy with the deal and that we go ahead with it. And Theresa May's majority is so small that it would only take a handful of Conservative MPs to side with Jeremy Corbyn's version of Brexit to cause essentially a crisis in British politics that may lead to May getting ousted. It might not lead to Jeremy Corbyn becoming leader. It might just lead to a new Conservative Prime Minister in charge. But it would certainly sow discord in UK politics and sow the seeds of maybe a Jeremy Corbyn prime ministerial role in the future.
Yeah, no, yes, I remember thinking back to the 2 days, it's a long time in politics, thinking back to Wednesday, yes, that there was discussion of, the rebel MPs maybe are going to want to join him. I say the rebel MPs, they're rebels to the mainline Conservative line. There are also, which is kind of, it's midway between, there's a kind of more left-wing part of the Conservative Party who might rebel and vote with Corbyn on this. Then there's the more middle Conservative Party who are most of the people we have kind of in power with. Some of them are a bit more right-wing. And then you have on the far right-wing side, you have Jacob Rees-Mogg. Is it the European Research Group that he heads up who keeps sending letters to Theresa May making demands? So they're obviously not particularly happy with the direction she's going in. So there's a lot going on there. And yeah, it could fracture and it could be very different than what we have now, potentially, even within the Conservative Party.
Yeah, definitely. It's our good old friend Jacob Rees-Mogg popping his head up again, isn't it? He's the one who would most likely run for leadership if a split like that was to happen, but we're a long way away from that.
And now for a new regular feature, Who Said It?
The concept is that we've got Jeremy Corbyn and Donald Trump, two, I think it's fair to say, different political figures in their politics and outlook on life. I'm going to give Tom some quotes, and you've got to guess who said it, Donald Trump or Jeremy Corbyn. Are you happy with the rules?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, here we go. Number one. What is security? Is security the ability to bomb, maim, kill, destroy?
That sounds like it's Corbyn.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm going with Corbyn.
It is. It's Jezza. See, I thought it sounded a bit kind of quite killy and hurty.
But I think it's supposed to be taken in the anti kind of war lens. That's how he's anti-war, yes. Right? So I feel like that must have come from this discussion. Was it last year or the year before when we were talking about bombing Syria and things like that?
Yes. Yeah, it was, back in 2016. We were doing all of that.
2 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very long time in politics. Okay, next one. You know the funny thing? I don't get along with rich people. I get along with middle class and the poor people better than I get along with the rich people.
I feel like that's got to be Trump tooting his own horn.
Yep, that's Trump trumping his own trumpet, just right there. Humble as ever. Experience taught me a few things. One is to listen to your gut, no matter how good something sounds on paper.
I mean, I feel that's got to be Trump. And it's if it's not, it's intentionally leading me the wrong way. So I'm going with Trump. First, I'm going with my gut on this one.
Yes, it's a very Trumpian move you've made, and it's right. Donald Trump did say it. We'll do two more. Okay. One of the key problems today is that politics is such a disgrace. Good people don't go into government.
Trump likes to use the word disgrace and things like that. But I can't help but feel it's kind of Corbyn on the back benches saying something before he was thrust into the limelight. So I'm going to go with Corbyn.
Corbyn? Oh, I'm afraid you should have stuck with your Trump gut.
Yep. Okay. Missed one.
Yeah, let's miss one. So the final one I'm going to give you today, there's great dishonesty in politics. I've always been covered by a press that's mostly financial press.
And the alternative is it's Corbyn being... So it can go two ways. It's either I think Trump being like, I've been covered by the financial press, which is different, or it could be Corbyn complaining about being covered by capitalists. But I don't know, dishonesty, I've always been covered by a press that's mostly financial. I think it's got to be Trump. Always is the key word, I think, if I heard you right.
It is Trump. Yeah.
Yeah, 4 out of 5. That's not bad.
It's not bad. I think the key to that one was he said by a press, that's financial press. Trump's vocabulary often means that he's sort of he says the same word over and over again, doesn't he?
Yes. I hadn't twigged that. I mean, if I had it written down. You have given a link. People can play along at home. But there's 12 total ones if you want to try. Obviously, we've given away 5 of them there. But this is a regular feature from several news outlets, isn't it? This was The Independent, but I've seen it before.
Yeah, there's lots of it. I mean, like I said at the start, they're both fairly radical politicians, but in a different way. But they are anti-establishment targets in most of their speech. So I think it's really interesting to compare and contrast how you can be on the opposite end of the political spectrum, but still kind of sounding the same on certain issues.
And with the kind of moving of things to be at the extremes of politics that we seem to be having at the moment, it's not surprising that I'm going to use the term extremist rhetoric, but not meaning as in literally on the extremes of left and right.
Yeah.
It's not surprising that the same kind of terminology can rile up the same people in a similar way, even though it may be for different causes.
Yeah, they're both sort of attacking people in positions of power a lot of the time as well. People on the extremes of politics, or maybe on further to the left or the right, they haven't been in charge for about the last decade at least, and now they're finally rising to the fore. So
it's been good talking again. Is there anything in particular you want to add at the end?
Keep an eye on. I would say that we probably haven't heard the last of Brexit.
I mean, that's not surprising. I'm hoping we won't have to talk about it every week, as we mentioned last time. Hopefully it'll be something more in the news next week. Got 2 weeks to get over the snow, so hopefully there'll be something more interesting to talk about.
I think maybe looking to America and seeing what's going on there. I know we've had Parkland at the moment, which could be a very big turning point in the gun debate, and also that's been sort of going under the radar at the moment. You've got the Robert Mueller investigation.
Yes, which is ongoing.
Yeah. In the past 2 weeks, that uncovered. I think they actually went and charged several Russians and linked them to certain things that happened during the 2016 election. So we certainly haven't heard the last of that investigation. So keep an eye out for those sort of stories coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Well, I will keep my eye out for those, and hopefully I'll be a bit more informed on those topics next time. Thank you for joining me, Rob.
That's all right, no problem. Thank you very much.
And thanks to our listeners for joining us. This is a bit where we ask you to like, comment, and subscribe, or something along those lines. We've had comments on Reddit. We've had people messaging us directly. It'd be nice if we had some comments on the website, so you can go directly to the episode via the link in the show notes and comment there. Also, it's the done thing as well when you've got a new podcast to ask people to go and rate it on iTunes. We're getting some ratings in. That's great. We need more ratings so that it actually displays an average so that people can see what people think of the podcast. And again, any comments on the format, we're trying to make it a bit snappy, a bit quicker. Hopefully we've done that this time. Let us know. And also you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/TTSS. That's for Tinker Tailor Soldier Sponge Productions, which is basically me and my computer. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
And on that bombshell.
On that bombshell.
And on that bombshell, we've done. That was fun. I'm not sure how we're going to do regular features going forward, but it'll be kind of funny if we have a different regular feature every week. We'll see how this goes.
That way.
Yeah.
I'll see what my new regular feature is next week. It'll probably be something different.
The regular feature in brackets.